Okay. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Hi, Tiffany.
Hey Ray, how you doing today?
I'm good.
Good. So today we wanted to take a moment and have a conversation about women, particularly around women's empowerment, women in the workplace, but really figuring out like getting back to like the core of maybe some of the issues that lead up to what's happening in sort of like the development of womanhood, um, and having like a conversation about what we're seeing, maybe sharing a little bit about personal journeys, and then also maybe some recommendations of how we can open things up, given that this is a new age that's coming through.
Mhm.
So, I wanted to take a moment and just ask you, you know, when we talk about women and womanhood, a lot of the formative years really happen in terms of like stepping into our sense of like our bodies and who we are, and this sense of like feminine power. A lot of that happens in sort of the teenage, pubescent age. And I'm just wondering, like, what are some of the patterns that you see? I know that, some of your work intersects with youth, and, just some of the trends that you've experienced.
Mhm. Yeah. So there's patterns traditionally, and then there's our unique context of today in this moment in time, which I think is different in part because of the existential nature of the world we live in.
Mhm.
So, I think a traditionally within that very formative age, um, there's a there's a process of individuation that's happening, right? A process of understanding one's own self identity, who I am, what makes me me, what makes me separate from parents, and stepping into adulthood. That especially in the West, I think there are a lot of challenges around.
Mhm.
Um, one of which being lack of ritual or process for young people to be able to take that on, right? Be able to have community support in knowing, in helping reflect and acknowledge and witness who this person self-identifies themselves to be, and to claim that, right? So I think that's a challenge that has existed for quite some time and lives within our collective, which results in a lot of disindividuated people who have younger parts of them that are still running the show. Now, that gets transitioned on. There's a lot of people who say that when, as a parent especially, you mirror when you sort of re-go through the trauma that you experienced at the age that your child is. So if your child's 14, 15, you're going to have things come up for you around what happened to you when you were 14 and 15.
Mm.
So there's this interesting relationship, right? Relational dynamic between, especially, women, mothers, and their daughters, or I think it's a more mothers and their daughters kind of thing, where there's this mirroring happening. And I think the big opportunity there is healing on both sides, right? For the older generation to be able to hold space for what the younger generation is going through, their own challenges in this unique time, while also acknowledging, hey, I have stuff coming up as well. Let's heal together, or we can heal together, right? Um, all of this within the context of, I think, a society that's responding to, sometimes reacting against, or just sort of, you know, being in relationship, pulsing against what has been a patriarchal, patriarchally dominated way of being and doing things, right? So there's the individual healing, there's that within the familial or lineage line, and then there's what's collectively happening as far as our collective renegotiation of balance between masculine and feminine, let's say. Now that's kind of a lot, but that's like a big zoom out image. I don't know what comes up for you, Tiffany, as I'm talking about that, if that resonates, or if there's anything, you know, more specific that's coming up with respect to all that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what's interesting, what comes up for me when you talk about these sort of like bypassing of the individualization, it's almost as if like we have these social media accounts that are supposedly supposed to have these outlets of creative expression and being able to individuate, right? But in a sense, it's almost as if we've commoditized what a human being should or be looking like, you know, during certain phases of our lives. Um, you know, when we look at Instagram, we see all these really beautiful, you know, photographs, but they're the same photographs of the same beautiful things, right? And it does make me wonder the messaging that we have, that it must be so confusing as a youth to be able to like grow up in this era of like desiring to move beyond that superficiality, whilst also like getting these sort of like counterintuitive sort of like messages from
Mhm.
society. Um, but I really love what you're pointing to of the opportunity of, it's almost as if, you know, humans as a society, we operate in cycles together. And so, you know, we have the opportunity to heal whilst also like going through the journey in partnership with different generations. And it goes both ways, right? It's, you're pointing to the mother-daughter relationship, ostensibly, you know, someone in there, you know, a teenage daughter with a working mom. But it also goes the other way intergenerationally, right? In the ways that we can also gain the healing, you know, from a wise woman to be able to allow ourselves to continue to grow in this sort of like in between generation.
Yeah. And so much of it, I think, goes to just authentic, genuine acknowledgement,
Mm,
right? Witnessing the power of being witnessed, I think, especially for younger women, is really what is at the heart, what's being craved and desired, right? Um, Social media, I think, is fascinating because I have often thought about how, especially in those formative years, again, you're looking for reinforcement about who am I, right? And a like is an acknowledgement in a way, right? Someone saying, "Oh yeah, I see you, and I like good job," right? And so that sort of all of a sudden gives this like dopamine boost of, oh yeah, okay, I am, right, I exist, this is my definition of me. And yet social media is completely inadequate at conveying any type of raw, sincere, authentic, vulnerable emotion, right? Because it is not a held and safe container. It's anyone on the internet, hence trolling, etc. So it's not designed for truth. It's not designed for sincerity, authenticity, vulnerability, especially for someone who is just starting to understand the edges of that, right? And how to express that and to be held in that. And so I think what's critical is spaces where young people can really be fully themselves and know that they are held and appreciated as that as well, so that they can own their wholeness of the wholeness of who they are. And I've talked with experts on ritual and who have worked in this space, because I've actually thought about designing ritual for rites of passage. And something that she mentioned is that they had started some design work with young people on rites of passage of this kind, but what was missing and what was required was actually the intergenerational piece. It doesn't work with just people your own age. You need the elders, you need those who have gone through life, who share your gifts so that they can acknowledge them in you, to go through the process with you, right? To also be witness and say, I see you, yes, I'm also a musician with musical gift, or I'm also a speaker with the gift of voice, or I'm also an intellectual with the gift of mind. And I see that in you. Yes, go forward. And so, I think that is a huge call to, women and men as well as mentors of younger people, younger women, to hold that space for them, whether they're succeeding or not, or figuring it out, or scared and vulnerable, to hold that space and say, I see all of you. All of you is precious and valuable. And yes, I acknowledge who you are, even as you're figuring it out, right? I think it's so important and something that all of us can do.
Yeah. Rei, what you're speaking about reminds me of a project that both you and I have been involved with collaboration with Matthew Chavez, as well as The Door in New York City. And it's called the Listening Project, in which there was about 5 to 6 youth that essentially led a art installation throughout New York City, where they set up listening booths to be able to collect and honor people's stories during the pandemic. And what was really interesting for me, because I was privileged to serve as a coach for some of the youth, was like a unbelievable ability to hold space for those who listened. So the youth themselves were listeners, but then also as a coach, I was able to like really create a container to be able to listen to the listeners. And in a way, I feel we mirrored exactly what you're talking about, right? This ability to bear witness to the youth empowerment, because they were leading the project. They were the folks who were creating and were at the tip of the spear in terms of interacting directly with the public. And then there was almost a coming of age of like this public leadership, this public service. And then also, as someone who was like a generation older, to be able to bear witness and affirm and say, hey, listen, like, great job. And by the way, let's deepen what you've learned so that you can continue to go forth with increased confidence and courage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that was a really powerful experience, in part because Matthew, who was leading the project, held so much space for the youth to step up, right? Very rare. I think that most people think younger people need help. They need to, I need to tell them what to do. And that level of saying, no, you guys are in charge. What do you want to do? Right. I think very rare as far as the leadership of a project goes. And to be able to say, I don't care what the outcome is, because the outcome's not important. The important thing is the process and you owning it, right? And the transition and teaching of leadership in that way, I think, is huge. Michael Mead's an amazing writer and storyteller and expert on myth, and he talks about elders these days really needing to support the youth, and just letting them lead, right? Getting out of the way and just helping them, right? Saying, what do you need? How can I help? As opposed to, I know how to do this, even like, let's do this together. It's like, no, just get out of the way, right? The young people today, again, because of the existential nature of the times that we're living in, I think have this fire underneath them, to enact change. We're seeing that all over the place with just these incredible young people stepping up as speakers and leaders, for their generation. It's like, just help them, right? Like, don't even tell them what to do, just help them. And that was something that I really loved about your work in the project, is actually coaching them and saying, and inviting them to step up more, right? Instead of telling them what to do, supporting what they already were feeling within them, because our society is so designed to not listen to young people or to think that they don't know what they're doing. To hear a young person say, hey, I don't know what this means and it makes me feel strange, for you to say something about that, right? Is so healing, especially for young women, right? To say, listen to that little thing that's bubbling up in you and take action and own your power around it. And she did, and led Matthew, who's leading the project, to rethink or restructure how they had conversations around language, how they informed decisions around the project. And that allowed her to step up more and more, right? Especially at that young age. It's like, once the neural pathways there for how to do that, it just, okay, I can do this, right? And you do that more and more and more. And so again, my seeing you do that and the outcome of that was so powerful to see, like, just also learning from others, like, how to do it. How do you give up power, right? How do you, like, real empowerment is about giving up power, or giving the power to someone else, helping someone else have the power, right? And especially with young people, I think just so important, and so needed, and in some ways so simple, but it requires that from us, right? It requires us to let go of whatever fear we have around not being the one with the power, which again goes back to your the healings both ways, right? Let me give you control, and let me find healing in my own patriarchal desire to be in control or to have control, and let me be surprised by what happens as a result, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I really love what you're pointing to, because in so many facets of our lives, whether it be the institutions, the workplace, even like family dynamics, we're so accustomed to that hierarchical structures where we look to those who are older, wiser, who have more money, in order to be the ones who lead. And what you're pointing to is the fact that everyone has the ability to lead. It's just a matter of being able to understand and being able to trust that inner wisdom within us. And, just speaking from my own personal experience of the project, I really needed, the ability to be able to like empower others was because I myself was empowered. I myself was being called forth to heal. I don't know if Tiffany 5 years ago, I'm going to like say confidently, Tiffany like 3 years ago would not have been able to do that, because there would have been I know better sort of like attitude. And because I've come to a point in my journey where I recognize the beauty and the wisdom that exists in everyone, irrespective of their background, age, demographic, it's so much easier to like give that power over, or to like empower others and to be able to call that forward. And so, when I think about women leadership, particularly in the workplace, it really calls forth this notion of humility first within leaders, particularly, and when I say that, particularly those who are of the traditional sort of like male archetype, right? And having the self-confidence, and by self-confidence, I'm talking about deep rooted self-confidence to be able to uh, empower others and to be able to actually call forth that wisdom and to be able to trust so that uh, that wisdom can be brought forward, on behalf of women, those who identify as women, so that all might benefit, right? Because as you and I know, with just like one particular gender leading, it's only a slice of the pie. It's only just one perspective, and we're missing so much of what is available to us. And the systems that we have are wholly inadequate to be able to address the major challenges that we have within this world. And so to be able to create from a place of wholeness really calls forward for all perspectives, all wisdom, to be able to formulate solutions for a creative future.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that I love that you talk about how the healing is required and able to empower others, right? That's actually a similar journey that I've had too, where I really have wanted to be the one that knows, right? To be, I know best, I'm better, whatever it is, right? And that is, when we talk about deconstructing the patriarchy within ourselves, right? That's what we're talking about. It's deconstructing the need to know, the need to control, the need to drive something to a particular outcome. That's all internalized patriarchal paradigm, right? The opposite is trust, right? The opposite is seeing, to what you said, the spark within someone else and being able to nurture that, right, without any understanding of what exactly is going to happen,
Mm.
except that if you stay in connection with it, real connection, support, care of it, that good things will arise, right? And that's not to say to not be discerning, right? um, if you are really in connection and attention with something, you can have discernment. It's not about just letting go and letting whatever happens happen. It's about being in actual relationship, right? And yeah, that takes deconstructing whatever fears we have within us around what will happen if we do that, right? There have definitely been times where I've worked with people and had a feeling of like, okay, that's enough. Like, I can't let you do any more or take on any more, because if I do, then it won't be done right, or it won't, whatever. Like I know best now. Like, I've let you have enough leash, and now I'm gonna take control again, right? Like that, you're nodding. I mean, I imagine that people are watching. Maybe you've thought that too, right? It's like, okay, I've let go enough. But again, to examine that, right? Like every part of our lives can be a healing journey if we can be in relationship with a young person and notice when that comes up and start to inquire, what is that, right? Like what part of me can't let go and why? And chances are there's been some part in your life where you've experienced that, right? Where you've experienced someone higher up, bigger than you in the patriarchal paradigm saying, no, you did it wrong. Like, you can't, you don't know what you're doing. I know what I'm doing, right? I'm not going to let you do something. You can't do it unless it's perfect. Whatever the message or experience was that we then internalize, and then we just, spit it back out again, because that's all we know. And so again, the opportunity here, I think, is to be in relationship with someone and to notice what comes up when we are in relationship with someone who our intention is there to support, right? If our intention is there to just purely help this person, why is all this control coming up, right? Why is this fear coming up? it's not about this person. There's something within us. And so if we can start to let that go, while being in service, I think really big possibilities on both sides and collectively for healing, that tendency towards dominance, and allowing for something much more generative.
Mm, mm. There's such deep learning here. What I'm taking away from this is we are mirrors onto one another, right? And our teachers come in many shapes and sizes and reflect back the opportunity to be able to grow, not only as individuals, but once we do that deep healing in connection with like ourselves, but then also in community, that's what real healing on a systemic level is all about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and there's no mirror like young people to really tell you. Because the patterns of language and kowtowing and whatever aren't there. And so it's a great dojo, great teachers, for us to be able to be humbled and to witness who we are and where our cracks are, so that we can fill them with gold, if you will.
Fill them with gold. Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us for today. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Please leave a comment and let us know what you think, how you've grown, what are the places of wisdom that you have yet to grow into, and in what ways are youth being, teachers onto yourselves.
And if there's anyone who we'll share some links for resources as well for great organizations that are enabling mentoring. If there's anything that's inspired as far as action goes, I know from this conversation, I'm realizing that I actually need to be in relationship with young people a little bit more. So that's something that I'm committing to. If there's anything that you're inspired to do or share, again, please leave a comment and we'd love to hear from you. And thank you to all who are already doing that and doing this work. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.